Okay, so this lesson is on finding the circumference of a circle, and then we will also go into finding the area of a circle. And I understand Mrs. Morris and I are doing this in 2 different parts. So if you're here just to see the first lesson, you can keep watching and find the rest of it, which is how to find the area of a circle. Or if you just need the second part of the lesson, just skip to the end. It's up to you. All right, so this is Unit 8, a brand new unit on shapes, area, and perimeter. And today is finding the circumference and area of a circle. So here's our learning target. I can use formulas, this is really important, to find the circumference and area of a circle. So we're going to go over the parts of a circle. A circle has many specific parts, including this right here is called the radius. And that is the distance from the center of the circle to the outside edge. And you'll notice that you could also use R for radius. Okay, so now let's say that we were to draw a line spanning from one end of the circle to the other. This is called the diameter. And it touches the circle in 2 different points, so it's just a straight line across the circle. And anyways, you can summarize diameter, you can abbreviate diameter with the letter D when we go to write out equations. And then in today's homework, you'll be given questions that will say, find the circumference of the circle. And the circumference is the distance around the circle, and we shorten that to C. So for example, here's the distance around the circle that we're shortening to just the letter C, circumference. So I'm going to go ahead and label these. Wow, that handwriting is awful. Circumference. And that word also goes right here. And then I'm going to also label the diameter because this is really, really important to know. So once again, diameter goes all the way across the circle, whereas radius just goes to half of the circle. And the diameter doesn't have to go horizontal, it could go anyway, as long as it's going from one edge of the circle all the way to the other. These are all a good example of diameter. Okay, next slide. So with the circumference of a circle, that's the distance around the circle. It can be found using 2 formulas. So the first one is you're going to use the button pi on your calculator, or pi stands for 3.14. This is what pi looks like if you're typing this into your calculator. Here it is. You'll do pi times your diameter, and that will give you the circumference. So you just do pi times the diameter. Now, what would you do? So like this problem number 2 is a really good example of using pi times the diameter. And you'll notice the diameter is 14. So all we're going to do is plug in our values. An example of that, if you don't have the pi button, you can use 3.14. The diameter is 14. So we just multiply those together to get our circumference. Or what you could say is 14 times pi. And that will give you the circumference. And the answer we're going to get is 43.96 centimeters. Do not forget the units, that's so important. Now, let's just say that you're looking at your circle. Number 1 right here is a really good example. There is not a diameter, but there is a radius of 6 inches. And if that goes to half of the circle, we could assume that the rest of the circle, if we were to complete that, would be another 6 inches. So in total, that is 12 inches as a diameter. So you could use this equation right here if you wanted to, or if you didn't want to figure out what the diameter is. When you're just given the radius, you could use a different equation, which is this one. The circumference is equal to 2 pi times the radius. So let's go ahead and try that equation on question number 1. The circumference is equal to 2 times pi times the radius. And let's plug in our values. I plug in 2. I'm going to plug in pi, which is 3.14, and it just keeps going. If you're not familiar with pi, it goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. But we're just going to shorten it to 3.14. And then I still have to finish the remainder of my equation, which says I need to also multiply by the radius, which is 6 inches. Just to make this more clear, I am multiplying 6 by pi and by 2, and that will give me my answer. Another thing that you could do in terms of pi, because 3.14 is pi, and then what I have left over is 2 and 6. So you could just type in your calculator 12 times pi, and you might be thinking, wow, you are making this a whole lot harder than it has to be. Like, we got it. You just do 12 times pi. You might have been able to tell that at the very beginning. I'm just filling out all of these spaces. There's multiple ways that you could answer these. As long as you're following the equation, then you'll do this correctly. So your answer would be 37.68 inches. And on to the last one. I've had quite a few students who seem to forget that with your equation, let's look at number 3. If you are only given the radius, then you should use this equation. Or you could use the other one, but you have to remember that you have to double your radius. So just the easiest thing to do is to use the equation that goes along with your circle. So far I have the radius, which is 3.5. So this would be a really easy equation for me to pick. I'm going to do the circumference is equal to 2 times pi times the radius. Let's go ahead and plug in the values. 2 times 3.14 times my radius, which is 3.5. A lot of my students have been forgetting to multiply by 2. It's part of your equation, it just has to be there. So don't forget to add it in. I'm going to change the color of my multiplying symbols because I don't want you to mistake them for decimals. Okay, so in terms of pi, that means if I had my little pi symbol, what else would I multiply by? Well, I would multiply by 2 and 3.5, which is 7. So you could have just said, oh, well, 3.5 times itself gives you 7. And so 7 times the diameter, if you were to use this equation, or 7 times pi, will give you your answer. So once again, both equations work. It's up to you how you would like to use them. The circumference is 21.98 meters. All right, next slide. So now we're going to talk about the area of a circle. The formula for the area of a circle can be derived by splitting the circle into smaller segments. So you'll notice we have a picture over here of this circle, and it has now been split into smaller segments and it forms a different shape right here, but it could still also form a circle. And the shape that it forms is a parallelogram. We can still figure out what the area is of this shape right here by using an equation, which is the area is equal to 1/2 times the circumference times the radius. There's another way that you could write this. Area is equal to 1/2 times 2 times pi times the radius, which equals pi squared. I think I just wrote that down wrong. Pi r squared. So based on the diagram below, and what I just spit out to you, all of this stuff right here, that might not have made so much sense, but just hold on and we will cover everything that you'll need to know to answer your homework. Okay, so based on the diagram below, how is the circumference of the circle related to the length of the parallelogram? Well, the length of the base of the parallelogram, and I'm going to shorten this, of the parallelogram is equal to half the circumference. And once again, if this whole section isn't making too much sense, that's okay, because I'm going to explain it more right here in a much more simpler term. Oh, darn it, I can't go down. It looks like my picture is cut off a little bit. But basically, the part that was down here, you'll see that there's a little part that's cut off. What that part was saying was the equation that you will need to use. So we're going to talk about the area of a circle. And the area of a circle measures the covering of a two-dimensional object. So for example, two-dimensional is this right here. It's not 3D, it's just on a paper like this. It's a circle, but we are going to be measuring the covering, so the whole surface of this. And there's a specific formula that we need to use, and I wrote it down a little bit earlier, but here it is again. The formula is area is equal to pi times our radius squared. And if you need to type that into your calculator, let's say, I'll give you an example in a second. So let's go ahead and plug in some values. Here's our circle, here's our radius, which is 3 inches. So area is equal to the pi button on your calculator, or 3.14 if you don't have it, times the radius, which is 3, and then you square it. If you were to type this into your calculator, you would push pi, then you would push 3, then you would push the little caret button, where it looks like a little mountain. All it's saying is we're going to push the number 2 up high. That's just one way to type that into your calculator. Let's see another way you could type it. A lot of calculators have a symbol on them that look like an X, and then they just have a blank over here. So you could type in pi 3x blank. This is all one button. And then you would type in the number 2. And all it does is just add a 2, and it's saying that the X is your 3. So if that one was confusing, I'll just get rid of that. So yeah, there's a couple different ways. Or you could push this button, pi times your value of 3, which is your radius, and then push the button on your calculator that looks like this, x squared. And all it does is just add a little square up here. That's all. Okay, so if you do that, the area that you're going to get is 28.26 inches, and area is squared. So you need to make sure that you just square that. All right, let's go ahead and answer the next one using our same formula. Area is equal to pi times our radius squared. So if my diameter is 10, my radius is just half of that. So my radius would be 5 centimeters. So I'm going to just put in the pi value into my calculator, and I'm going to multiply by my radius, which is 5, and then square it, and that will give me my area. And if I do that, I will get 78.5 centimeters squared. All right, and the last slide, which says the area of the circle can be given and require you to find other parts of the formula by solving an equation. Formula. Scratch that. I'm going to erase all of this and take my time and write it nice. Much better. Okay, so a circle has an area of 78.5 square inches. What is the radius of the circle? Well, let's go ahead and write out what the equation is to find the area of a circle. And that is pi times your radius squared, pi r squared. Okay, so it has an area of 78.5 square inches. What's the radius? Well, let's set up what we do know. We know the area is 78.5. The area is equal to pi times our radius squared. So the next step that we're going to do, I know pi is 3.14. And to solve this, I'm going to have to get rid of the 3.14 that's being multiplied to my r squared. So I'm going to divide by 3.14 on both sides. And if I do that, let me just plug this into my calculator really quick. 78.5 divided by 3.14, and it gives me 25. So that ended up canceling out the 3.14s on that side. And I'm left with 25 is equal to r squared. Now I still need to get r by itself, and so I'm going to take the square root of both of those. And what that does is it gets rid of the 2 and the 2 and the square root. They cancel each other out. So I'm left with r is equal to the square root of 25, and if you type that in your calculator, you just get 5. Because 5 times 5 is 25. So my answer is 5 inches. 5 inches is my radius. All right, question number 7. A pizza has a diameter of 18 inches. It is then cut into 8 equal pieces. About how many square inches is each slice of pizza? Well, my equation for area is pi times my radius squared. And I know that pi is 3.14, and my radius is 9 because the diameter was 18. And the radius is half of your diameter. So I'm just going to say 9 squared. I'm going to set that equal to a. And now I'm just going to plug away with my equation. And it looks like, if I type this in, 3.14 times 9 squared gives me 254.34 as my area. But the most important thing to remember is I also have to include my units, which is inches. And it's going to be squared because we're looking at how many square inches. It tells us it's going to be square inches. But they want to know how many square inches is going to be in a slice of pizza. And so there's 8 slices of pizza in a pizza. So I need to take my answer, I'm going to use a different color now, and I have to divide that by 8 to get how many square inches is in each slice of pizza. So the 254.34 divided by 8 gives me 31.7925, and you can just round up. Or you can write all your decimals out. It really doesn't matter. So my area is equal to 31.8 inches squared. All right, question number 8. A circular rug measures 8 feet across. What's the area of the rug? Let's highlight what we're looking for. Area, and I know my equation is area is equal to pi times my radius squared. And that means that area is equal to 3.14 times 4 squared. I got 4 because the diameter is 8, so my radius is just half of 8. And I squared it because my equation told me to. And if you type all that in for the area, you'll get 50.24 feet squared. And that is your answer. This is the homework ticket right here. Not that you care, but you would have had to have found the area and the circumference of this right here. So if you want some extra practice, I'll go ahead and work through this. To find the area, I'm going to do area is equal to pi r squared. Well, my radius is 3.5, and I have to bring down pi, and then I have to square it. And let's go ahead and just type that in. Pi, I'm having a hard time finding my button. There it is. Okay, pi times 3.5, and then I'm going to square it, equals 38.48 inches squared, because area is squared. Now to find the circumference, I'm just going to do 2 pi times my radius, because that's the equation that we have to find the circumference. So I'm just going to do 2 times pi times 3.5, because that's my radius. 2 times pi times 3.5 gives me 21.99. So the circumference is equal to 21.99 inches. You don't square the circumference, you only square area, okay? Let us know if you have any questions. We're excited about this unit because we like circles. It should be fun.